You know when we're rolling.
Rolling.
All right, so today we're doing the claiming the door exercise, and what we're going to be doing is using the escalating consequences to teach an invisible boundary for when guests come over and they're knocking on the door. We want the dogs to stay away from the door, so we're just teaching them to be more respectful. So when guests come in, they're using impulse control. They can be anywhere in this room or in the rest of the house as long as they're not beyond this boundary that we're setting right here, or crossing the tile in the other space in the hallway over there. So those are the boundaries that we're setting, and we're using the escalating consequences to keep them away from it. If the dogs are barking, I just want to remind you to ignore that at this point. So if they're barking later and you can't hear me talking, that's one thing that I will be ignoring. I'm not going to continue to disagree with them because they're barking. It's usually their last-ditched efforts of trying to gain control over the door space. This usually also helps prevent dogs from jumping up on guests when they arrive, because the dogs are getting practice of using impulse control, self-control to stay back, and they can go anywhere else in the house. So they do not have to be right at the boundary. Other things to note: pick one dog at a time and move them behind the boundary, and then go to the second dog and the third dog. Try to stay nice and calm. You want to use very little emotion. You just want to be kind of blank, emotionless, so that way your energy level doesn't try to increase theirs. So if you get really anxious and worked up, it's only going to affect the dogs and them having more energy to bring to the table. So you want to keep them nice and calm. We have one of the owners or the guardians playing the part of the guest, so he'll be coming over and knocking on the door. I asked him to knock a couple of times until I open the door. I want to use, kind of break this down into little pieces, because each thing around the door can be a trigger for them to bark or try to rush towards the door. So I'm going to play with the lock, I'm going to play with the door handle, and then I'm going to slowly open the door while watching them and making sure that they're being able to stay behind those boundaries. The dogs are starting to notice that something's coming. I'm going to stay here, that way it's more natural. Okay. And this is the second time we went through this, so they have had a little practice. When I take steps backwards, I want to take one step at a time. At this point, I want to take one step at a time, and I want to put my shoulders, hips, and face square towards the dogs, especially the dog that's going to be most likely to try to go through the boundary. Over time, I can start to turn my body like this towards the door, more natural, but looking at the dogs, and then eventually graduate to being able to break that eye contact. But the first thing you'll want to do is moving your body, and then eye contact last. You want your guests to be able to walk in and cross the boundary, and I usually encourage people to walk in and not pet the dogs right at the boundary. It makes it so the dogs aren't anxiously waiting for people to walk right across to see them, so they realize that people will walk over there and then they'll pet the dogs later. But you don't want to do it as soon as you get to the boundary, so I always encourage people to just walk right past the dogs initially. Come on in. Go ahead and shut the door. When you're comfortable, go ahead and walk into the living room without petting them. I'm going to stand right here though. Let's go. Go ahead. That's good. Perfect. Okay, so a couple of tips before we end the video. Talk to your partner, whoever's coming over or whoever's going to be coming into the house fairly frequently. Let them know that you're practicing this. That way at first people aren't surprised when you open the door butt first. That can shock a lot of guests. So let people know that you're practicing working on the dog staying away from the boundary, and then also practice with your family and your spouse, so that way text each other, say, I'm going to be home soon, do you want to work on the exercise? So that way they get a lot of practice. The more repetition they have with practicing with each other, you won't be as stressed out if you're working with your spouse and they know what the name of the game is. That way when a real guest comes over, they already have 99% of this down. The only surprise to them will be that someone new is on the other side of the door, but you'll get them to be back all the way up to the point of opening the door and then just working through the new process of having a new person arriving. So that will help you work through this much faster. All right, and I would encourage you to practice this a couple of times a week for the next couple of weeks, and that will set a strong foundation for helping them stay far away from the door and use the exercise that's called claiming the door. Awesome.